his side. Now, it's possible for the man to be in the shadows and the wife to be out of the shadows, but she can still stand behind her man and not be in the limelight. But I believe Isaiah's wife was the woman beside the man. I think they were both godly, and I think the fact that she is called the prophetess, I think, you know what I think? I think she was endowed with her own prophetic gifts that had absolutely nothing to do with Isaiah. I think God had gifted her in a special way. We get a little teeny little bit of insight into that in Isaiah 8:16. Because it says, wait a minute, I was in a loop, and I was in verse 16. I was like, what? That doesn't look like Isaiah 8:16. Duh, it's not. Okay. Isaiah 8:16. Bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples. Now, Isaiah, we do know historically, and I did read a lot of things on this. There's actually a lot written on this. He had a following. He had a group of disciples, maybe prophets, maybe, I don't know. We don't know what all their role was, but he had a group of people that followed him. I think it's possible Miss Isaiah maybe helped with that. You know, I think it's possible that when he was off advising Hezekiah and, being a chief advisor and then attending to the matters of the temple, maybe she was the leader, sort of the co-leader of that, was helping lead that, helping, do whatever, I don't know. We don't know. Yeah. But that's what I think. I also think that this was a woman who she wasn't just, and I love this about the Lord. She was a wife and a mother, and those are important. And I think the greatest gift that God gives women is that gift of children, that maternal instinct of being able to rear children. That is such a gift. And she had that, and she was faithful to that. But God didn't create women just to be wives and breeders. He created women for more. He created us to do more. Deborah's proof of that. Mary Magdalene's proof of that. Mary and Martha are proof of that. Mary sat at Jesus' feet and blatantly ignored her sister who was off in the kitchen preparing the meal. And Martha was mad and wanted Mary to get up, quit listening to Jesus, and go in the kitchen and help her. And Jesus said, no. You're encumbered with much serving, and you've got a lot on you, but Mary has chosen the better part, and it's not going to be taken from her. And what he did when he said that, especially in that culture, in a culture where women were not, a woman did not sit at a rabbi's feet like that and just glean knowledge. You just didn't do that. And the fact that he made it okay for a woman to want to sit there and hear him and learn about him and take in his presence and just be there and just be at the feet of Jesus. That is so, as a woman today, that is so amazing that he did that. That gives me peace, when people say, women are supposed to keep your women silent. You're not supposed to have anything to say. You're just supposed to be there. You're supposed to look pretty. Make sure you got your glory all looking nice. Make sure, you come in and you look good and you smell good, but you're not supposed to do anything. Well, that's not the Bible. That's not the Bible I read.
What's man?
Exactly. I think the fact that he calls her the prophetess, I've really ruminated on that. I mean, I have sat and I have contemplated and I have meditated on that. And I think these are the reasons that I feel like the Lord gave me. Maybe one of the reasons why she's called the prophetess and we don't know any more about her, maybe that was a way of protecting her. It's possible she was known. It could have been protection. I don't know about that. It could be that since Isaiah was so well known, everybody knew who Isaiah was. I'm sure everybody knew who Mrs. Isaiah was. I don't think she was unseen. And maybe she was called the prophetess because, people they know who she is. I don't know. These are things that I've sat and I've, like I said, I've sat in the presence of God and I've asked Him to help me, and these are the things that I've come up with.
I think I got it.
Well, okay. Let me go
Yeah,
first,
I
and
know.
then
I
you tell
just
me.
want to let you say it's in the Word. I got it.
I think the reason why God called her the prophetess, and we don't know anything else about her, we don't know her name. I think it's to highlight the fact that she was a prophetess. I think that's His way of lifting her up.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that.
I think that's a way of showing what a great woman of God she was. That yes, she was a wife. Yes, she was a mother. And she was probably a very good wife and a very good mother. But she was a prophetess. And that could be, God giving her a little glory.
That's it.
She's the prophetess, because when we humble ourselves and we're not reaching for the limelight, we're not craving the glory, we're not craving the honor, God's going to give it to us. God deserves the glory, He deserves the lion's share, but God lets us share in that glory too. And I think that's a way of highlighting this woman and showing what an exceptional woman of God she was. And how strong that gifting was. And when I think of her, honestly, one thing that I thought of when I was thinking about what she would do, I imagine that, it's possible He could have come in when, He came in, I'm sure many days, late. They were sitting down to supper. Maybe she waited to eat with him after the kids were asleep, just so they could get a little, alone time together as a couple. And he might walk in and say, honey, I had another vision. I had another word from the Lord. And I could see her, well, why don't you tell me about it? Tell me about it. Share it with me. Maybe he shared it with her. And maybe the Lord put her in his life to maybe help give her insight, give him insight into what the Lord was saying. Because isn't that why the Lord created woman in the first place? To be a helpmeet to man? To meet man where he was and to help him and to be a helpmeet.
Shoot, they need help.
Thank you.
And that was her, maybe that was one of the ways she used her prophetic gift. I don't think that's the only way, but I think that's one of the ways. I think it's possible that, he went to her for advice. Or maybe if it was a prophecy, maybe, he said, I came back from a meeting with the king, and this situation isn't good, we really need to pray about it. And she said, well, let's pray. And maybe they prayed together.
Yes.
In their little home, in their home, sat there, just the two of them, and they lifted this, and they lifted whatever needed to be lifted before the Lord, and they went together in prayer. There's so little that's said about this woman, but I think the little that's said is so much. And I tell you what, I made a point at the end when I was talking about Noahdiah of talking about her Instagram and her Facebook, and I'm sure she would have been into all of that. This woman lived mostly in the shadows. In comparison to her husband. She really did. But the Lord saw her heart, and he saw her walk, and he saw how faithful she was to him and to her family and to her husband. And he exalted her a little bit and said, you know what, you're not Isaiah's wife who gave birth to a son, you're the prophetess. You're the prophetess. And another reason, and then the final reason, and this is the end, and another reason why I think she's called the prophetess, I don't think that's just God's seal of approval. I think that's Isaiah maybe bragging on his wife a little bit. Because how many men and women, when they're married, how many people do you hear? I hear this a lot. My husband is the man. He is just the man. And it's like he can't do anything wrong. He's good, at least at that moment. You know, maybe 10 minutes later, you know, he's the worst ever. But in that moment, he's the man. And I've heard men do that too.
Yeah.
She's the woman. She's not just a woman, she's my woman. And he was a prophet, and they were able to share in this gift together, and she was the prophetess to him. She wasn't just a prophetess. She wasn't just some little woman that was good and sweet and cute to look at. She was his. And I think he was proud of his wife, and I think he was very proud of her gift. And I think it made him happy. I'm sure it made his life, it enriched his life in so many ways to know that he had a wife who could share in his gift. They had that bond. I mean, I think that only brought them closer together. And I mean, I'm sure he had a lot of external forces pulling at him. I mean, the kind of leadership he had, I can't imagine just the daily things he had to deal with. I mean, that's a lot. So I think if I had to choose between being Noahdiah and having a Facebook and an Instagram with millions of followers and known to the world and known because I was a false prophetess or false priestess or whatever else, or I had to choose between being Isaiah's wife and only being known as the prophetess, I think I would want to be Isaiah's wife. Because Isaiah's wife, I'm sure she's one of those silent people who walks here on earth, who doesn't get a lot of credit and doesn't get a lot of glory here, and she lives a righteous life and does what she's supposed to do. And when those people go to glory, glory shouts from one end of glory to the other with what those people have done, making it known that this was somebody who lived for me. This is somebody who took a stand. This was somebody that lived a righteous life. It may have gone unnoticed on earth, but it's noticed up here. Excuse me. I would rather be Isaiah's wife, I gotta tell you. I'd rather be that person who's anonymous down here and the earth takes no notice of, and get to glory and have what you've done, and have people say, good job, good for you, you were faithful. I mean, can you imagine hearing Jesus say that? I mean, hearing Jesus look at you and say, well done, good and faithful servant. I mean, nothing on this earth can compete with that. It's kind of like the song, it's kind of like that old George Beverly Shea song, I'd rather have Jesus. I'd rather have Jesus. Noahdiah can keep her little Facebook and her Instagram, and she can keep all of her little occult powers and all of that stuff. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. That's all I want. Just give me Jesus and give me more of him. And don't be stingy, Jesus, when you give me yourself. Give me an extra heaping helping. I want some, and then I want more. And then I want more. And then I want more. And I want to be a glutton in the spirit for Jesus. So that I can give. So that I can give, so that I can give, so you can give it out. Not so you can keep it and you can just be, Jabba the Hutt, but so you can give it and you can be a blessing to people. 2 women, 1 verse for each. And there's so much to be said. And yet there's so little to be said too. But I'm thankful. I'm really glad you asked me to do this, Myra. And I'm really glad. I'm really glad you did, because I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't have asked me. And I feel like this has really blessed me. This has really grown me up, this study, in a lot of ways, because I really had to depend on the Lord in ways that I really haven't before. Because it's one thing to go to a book and to have a teaching and to know you have to study and say, okay, Lord, guide my teaching. You know, especially when I was preparing for Joel. I mean, I could read Joel. I mean, there's lots there. I mean, you could fill a library with volumes on Joel that I didn't even touch, that I didn't even cover. And probably most of the other prophets too. Not just him. But when you have something like this, where you've only got one verse each, and you've really got to dig into the Spirit, and you've really got to go to those places spiritually, it grew me up. I'm going to shut up now. I'm sure I've been talking far too long. So.
That was good.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Speaking of Joel, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does it say about who's going to prophesy?
Young men and young women.
Well, here's another thing too. That the woman who had, was it 7 husbands? In Jesus.
Right.
They asked, it was a hypothetical story.
Right.
And he said, in heaven they're not married nor are they given marriage. And so, what does that mean? Will we be known as man and wife in heaven? You know, I mean, we will stand. We will stand in God's presence in a different way. We won't, they just say, that's my husband or that's my wife.
Right.
Um,
But who knows if, you know, you'll like live in the same mansion or live in the same place, you know, inhabit the same space. You may not. I mean,
It's all conjecture.
yeah.
But
Well, it's till death do us part, and we'll never die, so.
Well,
This-
And depending on who you're married to, that could be a blessing or a curse.
No.
which is it,
No, I didn't mean that. But I don't know. I mean, we definitely know, even if you're married and you walk together, I mean, we all have to stand before Jesus separate. I mean, you have to give an account for your life. Your wife has to give an account for her life. Myra has to give an account for her life. Jack has to give an account for her life. His life separate. We all, you know, we all come before Jesus, not as a unit, but as, you know, one person. So.
I think most people think that, you know, you're gonna be in heaven, you know, with your spouse, but honestly, from what I've read, that's just our human reasoning, right?
Yeah, I mean, because we really don't know. I mean,
Well, sister, they don't marry. Well, you'll know people, like you'll know your mother
right.
and sisters and brothers and all that. So
But we'll be perfect.
And we'll know everybody else too, because I was listening
Yeah.
to I was listening to the question and answer session this week with J. Vernon McGee, and one of the questions that somebody asked, of course he's dead now, but they, at the time that he was alive, they asked, how did Peter know who Elijah and Moses were on the Mount of Transfiguration? And he said, that's just one of those things God gave him. He knew. There was just a spiritual knowing when he saw them, he knew who they were. And he said, and I think that gives us maybe a little insight into what it's going to be like into heaven. You know, we're going to walk and we're going to see people like, hey, Moses, how are you? Look, there's Abraham. Look, there's Paul. Look, there's Nehemiah. Look, there's Isaiah. Look, there's Isaiah's wife. Look, there's David. You know, we're just going to know. I mean, how do you know that? I mean, I don't think you can explain that. I don't know.
You know, when you get there and you walk through the pearly gates, they get one of those little paper stickers with your name on it and stick it right
Hello, my name is Child of the One True King.
That's good. I like that.
there. You better walk around with a sticker right here.
Yeah, like I got the other day when I loaded cow.
Feel like it's gonna say, Noah of the flood. You know.